Welcome to Namaste Saigon. Here we are, Seb and Jay, and today we have a very special guest, Mr. Danny, and you're going to get to know him a little bit. First, I want to give a shout out to this beautiful place that we're in. We're in Whisfee Cafe, and that is in the very interesting building that also features Mantu Vegan. I don't know if this building has a name. Do you know?
I really don't think it does.
Okay. Well, we're in D1. And you could look it up. We'll put it in the podcast notes, how you can find this amazing cafe. And we're going to do something interesting. You've got a nice shot here, but we're going to switch halfway to another shot of this place, and you'll see how really nice it is. So, we're going to start off by cracking open this sparkling 2020 bottle of sparkling water.
It's been there since 2001.
It's been there since 20.
I don't know if we should drink that, my friend. I don't know.
First pour for our guests.
If we survive, muscle tough, baby. Wow. Did you work as a waiter before you left?
Yeah. I used to be a waiter.
Very fine. I love your styling to serving the
I
bottle
used
of
to
water.
serve very, very expensive bottles of wine.
Really?
Yeah.
Can I tell?
Just kidding. Sorry.
Did it?
No experience at all.
When I was a bartender in Australia.
Cheers, guys.
Cheers, guys. When I was a bartender in Australia about 3 years ago, I was working for this very high-end hotel, and I was one of the help of the main bartenders. And the guy left, and then he left me in the bar by myself. And one of the owners, he came, and he usually never talks to us actually, but he came to the bar and he said, "Hey, I want this bottle of wine, and I want you to bring it to the table." And I said, "Okay, but this other guy, the main bartender, he's not." He said, "Yeah, it's okay, you bring it." The thing is, I didn't know how to open bottles of wine at that time. So I couldn't say no to him because I'm the bartender. So I took the bottle of wine, the bottle opener, go to the table. I'm like, what I seen in TV is just take the bottle and kind of like present it. I'm like, yeah. And everybody's like, that's the one. And I take the wine opener. I'm like, please, just put it exactly in the middle and start going deep. And I finally got it. And when I took it out, I was so happy. But then when I looked down, I noticed that like 20% of the cork was missing and it was inside the bottle. And then I looked at it, and then the owner looked at me back and he was, "Are you fucking kidding me?" He said, "Go and get the other guy, and I don't want to ever see you opening bottles of wine in my restaurant." And I had to just leave the bottle. Namaste, my friends. Go back.
Embarrassing.
And that's my story, and how I used to be the finest wine opener in town in Australia.
Wow.
Yes. Cheers for that, guys.
Good story. Thank you, guys.
Hey, man. Thank you, guys.
So, we're going to share some stories today. We're going to get to know Danny a little bit. Danny is a very interesting character.
So interesting.
And believe it or not, he is the second Colombian in Vietnam. This is the first. So this is Colombian number 2 in Vietnam.
Colombia number 2.
Colombia represent.
Yeah, these guys
baby.
are representing hard, and I'm the only Canadian in Vietnam, of course. Danny's actually from Hong Kong. He spent a lot of his life there, and he has had let's say, a very interesting life. Sort of beginning in Colombia and then spreading out to different places, and now he's here with us. So, Danny, welcome.
Thank you guys for having me here. It's pretty cool to have a talk with you guys. Just let it run.
So let's begin by just sharing something. I'm from Colombia, 18 years old.
Wow,
that's beautiful.
First of all,
hey, look at that. Look at that beautiful.
Drink.
Wow.
This is called what? Would you tell us?
Coconut coffee.
A coconut coffee. Have you ever drank that before? Pretty sure you haven't.
Tastes like a little bit of heaven in your mouth.
A coconut heaven.
This is their specialty here, or at least one of their specialties. Whenever I come here, whether I have a coffee or not, I'll have one of these to end it off with. Like, I'll usually have a regular coffee, and then before we leave, we have one of these to cool ourselves off.
Just cool it off,
This
baby.
is perfect.
Fantastic.
So
For the
if
ride.
you ever come here, that's what you gotta order.
Exactly.
Or your money back.
You
If you don't like it, I
guarantee
personally
that?
would give you your money
You
back.
guarantee
Give
that?
us your bill.
Okay? Yes,
Okay,
send me your
the
bill.
same the bill in the podcast. Okay, so when I was 18 years old, I left my country and never went back. So I took what they called off the beaten path, right? And the reason why we invited my friend right here, Danny, is because he is exactly the same story. He was born in Colombia, and what you just share a little bit of
Yeah,
backstory.
I mean, you were just saying like you're like off the beaten path, right? And I think I told you this the other day, but I was meditating the other day, and somehow for like I was meditating like already 30 minutes already, and I have this vision of my high school teacher who gave me a bookmark when I graduated from high school, and it was a poem called "The Road Not Taken" by Robert Frost.
Frost, oh yeah.
You know this?
Yeah.
And she gave me this bookmark, and basically it's about this guy who had two paths.
Fork in the road, right?
So I think he took one way, he regretted it, came back, and he took the road less traveled by, or something like this. And that made all the difference. And I was like, whoa, this is me, man. Like, I mean, you said that I can 100%.
We're in synchronicity in this podcast then. Yeah, and I think that that's what it brings us together, that the three of us pretty much have the same story.
Yeah.
It's a story that you usually don't hear very often, just because we pretty much decided to leave everything behind and just go and seek for a new life.
Here's
For
a question.
complete.
Do you guys feel successful? Right here, right now. Do you feel successful?
I think it
Extremely
depends on
yes.
what is success to you, and if I think in terms of just financially,
What
I don't
does-
feel as successful as I could be. But in terms of what do I want in life? I want some happiness. I want some time with good people, like my friends and family. I want to have a roof over my head and a nice surrounding. I've got all of that, so I mean, I'm pretty successful.
Let's.
I would say.
You know what? That's a great question, but let's first define
What is
what
success.
success is for each one of us. Because if we don't have the same meaning to the word, I think that we can be in a little bit of confusion. So I can start by myself.
Yeah, what does success mean to you?
So for me, success means to become what you want to become in life. That for me is success. You know, many people, every single individual have a completely different vision for what that ideal self is, and what ideal self is feeling, and what ideal self is having. So whatever it represents for each individual, if for you success is being able to go into the mountain in the Tibet and be in the monastery for 20 years, that's success, just because that person, that individual had a vision for themselves and they accomplished. So in my case, I definitely feel a deep and huge sense of success, just because for me, the vision that I'm trying to attain really comes down to feeling good all the time and as often as I possibly can. And that is in my control, because maybe I cannot control the stream of money is going to come into my life tomorrow, but I can control how and managing my emotions on a daily basis and how I'm feeling.
Yeah.
So for me, success for me represents feeling good and feel as good as you possibly can feel, no matter what are the circumstances around you.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think managing your emotions is key to success. I think for me, success revolves around the idea of getting back to my original state of being. Because once you can go backwards in your mind and control that and be your original state of being, you have so much limited power. Because once you get there, I think that's a success. What happens after that?
That keyword you're mentioning, the original state of being, can you elaborate on that a little bit?
I think that comes from if I get there, right? When I get there, I will have become more conscious and arrived. That's the word, right? I think we'll probably always be on that path of becoming. We're always becoming.
We're always evolving.
right? Yeah, exactly. So a way to get that is to start being conscious about all the patterns and behaviors that we've inherited from our parents and from society. from what we see everywhere. People talk to us in relationships, and start getting rid of those things of what people have told you to believe in or to pursue. Once you start being conscious of that and being like, oh, okay, this is not who I am. And you keep going deeper and deeper.
Just because what you mentioned right here, I think that you and me understood the same. Maybe what is original state of being for you? Because now you have a daughter, and I think that if anyone in here right now has experience in firsthand what is the original state of being of humans, is you. So if you can just share a little bit, what do you see with your daughter and this original state of being that we're trying to, all of us, going back to?
I think that what I see, like what is our original way of being, without the programming, without all the influence from everything around us. I think it's joy and happiness, because I see it. This little girl is 1 year old, and she's laughing, smiling, and always like trying to, pursue things that make her happy, and she's always playing, and it's a very joyful, happy attitude she has.
Curiosity?
Very curious, curious, and I think that is, like, being happy, I think that's success to me. They say that, you could see a man who has, whatever, millions of dollars, and then you see a guy who's lives in the street, and he just meditates all day, or just like one of those swamis who just lives in the jungle and meditates all day and he has no possessions. He might be happier than the multimillionaire who's upset and sad and unhappy and doesn't feel successful because he's not a billionaire. So in society, I think we're kind of programmed to feel that financial wealth is success.
Yeah.
Really? I mean, wouldn't you rather be happier than be rich but very poor in your mental feelings?
Sad.
I don't want to be sad and upset and a millionaire.
It's so sad.
It's just perspective, right?
So I think it also comes down to your ego. Like, dude, I've read that, like, when you have I want happiness, your I is your ego, your want is your desire, right? So when you take away your ego and your desires, you just live with happiness.
That's
And
a very
okay,
interesting
right?
thing.
This is what you're saying. Like,
I think I heard about this. I think it was, I'm not sure if it was the Dalai Lama or who. Someone asked them, like, how can I
I think it was
be happy?
Buddha.
I want happiness. And he goes, well, first, remove your ego, right? Remove the I, and then remove desire, which is want.
yeah.
And then when you remove your desire and your ego, you're left with happiness.
I think
Very interesting.
it's more about being one with your ego, because
You can't get rid of it, right? Completely.
you could.
It's, and
You can't.
If you,
I think your ego
when you
is part of
experience
it.
like ego there.
The thing is,
I think that's a theoretical concept, but it's like enlightenment. Maybe only some people, maybe like the Buddha, can attain that.
okay, but actually it's beautiful that we're talking about this subject, because it's a conversation I have very often with other people, and I think that this is great for the podcast, for whoever who's listening, watching this episode. So as you enter kind of like the spiritual world, we hear very often this idea of the ego, and more than often what you hear is the ego, and they use it as like a reference of a bad thing, right? They use it as a reference
like a
of like,
negative thing.
yeah, oh no, that's your ego. Oh, he has a huge ego. And ego. And as I'm kind of like getting into more personal development, spirituality, the more I start noticing how, first of all, the big of misunderstanding that there is around the concept of ego.
Yeah.
Because how would you define ego? What is the ego?
Yeah, I think we should define it.
Let's define ego.
Because
Because
there's a couple of different ways that people think of the ego.
how do you define ego?
I would define it as the self-image that you created because of the influence around you. It's not your true self, but it's the self that society you've created due to your influences or experiences with society. You know, that's the way I define it.
I'd say like you have your self-structure. That's like self-structure is what you are, what makes you, right? And
Like your essence?
Soul,
you can define it however you want. Your soul,
Okay.
your true
your
self.
essence, your true self, consciousness. But when we're born into this world, we already have so much like things coming onto us, like are sort of putting layers into us that are forming the ego. Like what parents tell us, how they treat us, what we see every day.
So yeah, pretty much we're on the same page, kind of. For me, the ego is just whatever you identify yourself with, how you see yourself, how you see the world.
So
That's
it's
your ego.
self-image.
But it's not just the self-image about yourself, but even it is the image that you have about the world. Because is your ego talking when you make sense of something from your perspective? That's your ego image right there. So the ego is just whatever you identify yourself with. That's kind of like the definition I give it to them. And then the next layer to that, it was the conversation I wanted to get into. I always, when I talk to people, I remember one of my friends, I used to tell him, oh yeah, I'm trying to kill my ego. I'm trying to kill my ego. And then my friend, he is a very wise man, and he said, Dano, he told one of my friends that, and he shared with me, and he said, you shouldn't be trying to kill your ego, because as long as you have this experience in this body, you will have an ego. What you need to do is you should try to tame your ego,
Yes.
to train your ego
Tame it.
to serve you for like a purpose of well-being, whatever is going to support your well-being.
That's why you want to manage your emotions, because you don't want your emotions to get the worst out of you, right? Otherwise, they'll just be taming you.
And
They
that's
don't control you, it's
Yeah.
controlling you.
most of my life, that's how I lived, right?
Most people live like that.
Yeah.
And they never realize about it. And that's actually the point that I wanted to get to. People speak about the ego, and many people look at someone that they dislike and they say, oh, they have a huge ego. What does that even mean? In reality, the concept of a huge ego, you don't have a small or big ego. There's no way to quantify
size.
your ego. You can quantify it. Your ego is just your identity. So for me, what I realized in my journey is that the key is understanding that your ego is not your enemy. It can be your enemy if it's untrained, like most people have, and most of my life I lived by. But when you realize that you have the power to adjust the ego to be one with source energy. What I mean about source energy is, can you align your ego to see the world as your heart will look at the world? If you are looking at everything from a broader perspective, looking at it with like wise eyes, you can have an ego that is in tune and in alignment with the beauty in everything, and it will be supportive for your journey in life.
You know, you reminded me of this quote that I read the other day. It said, I think shared with you guys, but it said, wisdom is knowing you're nothing, but love is knowing you're everything.
Wow,
Interesting.
deep.
Yeah.
So my question is, did you guys have a different perspective around ego before this conversation? Because I do think that when we understand this key element about the ego and how the ego actually is just a component that you have as a human being. If you, for example, have this body, you will be someone who will think. You cannot say, stop thinking for the rest of your life, you will die.
You think, therefore you are.
Exactly. So I think that this is a good path that we can take on this conversation, because we had the journey of the unbeaten path, right? And I think that before we took on that journey, the ego and the whatever we identify ourselves with, it needs to be so different from what we are today. Just looking into retrospective,
Yeah.
I believe. So if
I
you
think
guys,
our our individual efforts to tame our ego have put us on this path and actually physically brought us here. Yeah. So, just speaking for myself, growing up in Toronto, in the West, you know, it's very westernized culture, and I felt that I was a product of the environment. I thought the way that other people thought, that, you know, success meant money, this and that. You have to be confident, you gotta be this way, you gotta be that way, you know. You gotta live up to those expectations that society has of you. And so I felt always that I was a certain person, and I wanted people to see me as a certain person, and I gotta make sure I am behaving that way and always sticking to that image. But I think it was around 10 years ago that I started thinking a little differently, because I started reading about the ego, personality, and life, and all of these different things. And I started thinking that maybe I'm a product of my environment more than I should be, and that maybe I should be thinking for myself and trying to find a path that's more truer to myself. So that's when I started traveling. And I think that traveling is probably the best way to kickstart a journey like that, because it actually is a journey. Second of all, when you're taken out of your environment, you can think differently. But when you're in that environment, it's so difficult to even change your perspective. Right?
It's also, we're also very, very privileged. We're also very privileged because we can say this, and I think we've all had a huge amount of privilege in our lives. Compared to other people who might not get a chance to, you know, step out of our environment. They'll just stay there, in their level of thinking, their box or matrix, in their own matrix. They will never, perhaps, be able to get out of there and see something different.
Yeah, like if you grow up in a small village in India or even here in Vietnam, you might stay there your whole life, right? And you don't really have that privilege like we do of kind of jumping out of your environment, seeing a different world, and then starting to realize that you aren't that person that you were in your city. And yeah, that helped me. I mean, coming here, traveling around, I started to see that people thought differently than they do in the West, and that there were different ways to be, different ways to act, different ways to think. And that's what helped me to kind of break down that self-image that was created almost for me, you know? And I mean, you can't help it. You're a product of your environment most of the time.
And you know what? That thing I think is so key that we should discuss about it, because look at that. We just realized about what do we have in similarities that allow us to not only to share pretty much a very similar path in the dynamics, but we are in the same destination right now.
Same place, yeah.
Same place. And I think that one of the essence and one of the core elements into how that happened was that we changed our environment.
Yes.
And I never really understood. I remember before I started traveling, before I was able to leave Colombia, I used to watch a lot about videos about travel. And one of the patterns that I always saw was that they always speak about this concept of when you travel, your life never is the same. You will never have the same life. And I was like, yeah, of course, yeah, how can I have the same life? It's gonna be different, it's gonna change so many things because I'm gonna discover new things that I never seen before. But that was very kind of like logical thinking of like, okay, I think I get it. But once I took that step, within even 4 weeks of me changing my entire environment, it opened my perspective and my mind into a level of awareness I never expected it. I couldn't logically comprehend before I did it.
I think logic is overrated.
Always,
It's
so
like
much.
What we think is logic now is our level of understanding and awareness and logic. My level of logic is not the same as a scientist's level of logic. So my level of logic may change with my experiences, right?
I think it also ties in well with your consensus of reality. And I mean, it all goes back to your original state of being, right? Like, this is all what it is, just being shaped by everything around us.
And you know what? I just want to mention this because this is really good. What you said. You said logic is overrated, right? And the beautiful thing about whoever is watching this podcast right now is this. Every single time, I'm pretty sure that you're faced with a choice, an opportunity. That is to step outside of your comfort zone. And most of the times people actually have things they know they should do in order to pursue their dreams, but they haven't done it for a very, very long time. And it's just that jump that they haven't been able to make. And I do believe that most people are experiencing that right now. I am experiencing it right now myself. So when you think about that, you know what is going to be the outcome when you take certain behavior or certain step, you always going to analyze that from your logic. And what I wanted to kind of like emphasize here is that your logic will never be able to make an accurate kind of prediction into what is going to happen once you do that action that you're procrastinating for so long. So that limit and that barrier that you have right now in your life is only a mental barrier. Yeah. It doesn't exist. You cannot predict how the future is going to look like. You can only have faith that by taking a step, things will work out for you. Yeah. And they always do.
I just read it the other day. I read something that they said that when you step onto the path starts to show itself.
Reveal
itself to you. You know, and I also remember a quote from a movie. They were saying that you don't need to know how to get where you want to go. You need to get on the path, and it's just like you're driving in the nighttime. You only see as far as your
like 2 meters ahead from your
car.
car.
You only see a few meters from the car what your car's lights can show you, but that's all you need to be able to continue going. You know, so it's that's what holds us back, because we want to be so sure of we're going to get to that spot, or else I'm not going to start. And that's the mistake that I know I've made so many times in my life.
So many times.
You know, and I held myself back.
It also comes down to, I think, your parents and people around you telling you things that you cannot do. That manifesting like their own insecurities and everything.
Projecting,
yes. And that comes from their parents and their parents and their parents. So for me, like I've recognized this, for example, and I think my childlike spirit growing up was in some ways just like hurt, I guess. So I guess myself as a kid, I started protecting that part and being less childlike spirit, for example. Being able to express more freely. So I think, that sounds so dark, but it's not too dark. I just realized for mine. But I had a great childhood, by the way.
we hope so.
But it just comes down to like our environment.
Yes, but the thing is, these people, they're not necessarily trying to be mean to you, or they're just
mean
trying
well.
to protect you. They mean well.
Very well.
100%.
And you know what? This is the thing. Everyone, most people have friends. They mean very well for them. The only problem is that they're only trying to suggest ideas or encourage them from their level of awareness. Based in their own experiences, based in their past programming as well.
Yeah.
But in reality...
And then you're absorbing them.
Here we are. We're back.
Hey bro, can you get a little bit closer to me, please?
You want me to sit in your lap, bro? Just ask me, man. You just have to ask.
Like old times, man. Because coronavirus did change one thing, and that definitely is the distance that you
Social
have
space, yeah.
with the other person next to you.
You know, it's funny because there was always that idea of personal space. And it's true. Like, I mean, really, if there's a stranger, you don't want a stranger within your arm's length of you, because it's fucking weird, unless you're in a lineup or something, right?
Can you tell the story about you're in India?
Yeah, I was in India, right? And I was standing in line for a good 45 minutes to buy a ticket to the train, for the train. Get to the front, and first of all, the one in the bed, I kept on feeling this guy kept on like touching me from the back, right? And I look back, and it's just his chest bumping up against my back, but there's like 2 feet behind him, and he has a lot of space. And a couple of times I stepped forward, but he keeps stepping forward. And he kept on bumping. I was, what is this? So I turned around and I said, hey, bro, give me some space. And he goes, what's the big deal? I'm standing in line too. And I'm like, yeah, I know, but you don't have to stand so close. And he goes, why not? And I said, I couldn't explain it to him. I was like, hey, listen, give me a little bit of space. I can't even breathe here. You know, you're squishing me.
Yeah.
And he was like, oh, Mr. American has to have some space. You know, he was like that.
Oh,
And
bro.
when I got to the front, some other guy walked in, opened the door to the establishment, to the office, walked in and walked right in front of me and goes, can I get 2 tickets? And I was like, what the? I was like, bro, hey. This is a lineup. There's many of us standing here, and I've been here for a long time. Why do you come right in front of me to buy the ticket? And he goes, oh, because I'm in a hurry. And I was like, we're all in a hurry. You know, he goes, come on, what's the big deal? And I said, hey, this is not very nice, man. Come on. Well, you can go behind me if you want. And the guy behind him said, no, not behind me. The guy ended up at the back. But it was so funny that people just don't have an idea of personal space, for one thing, or of single file or order or a lineup. No, it's just kind of a funny story.
I remember when I was in Colombia, in the transport we have, sometimes in rush hour, especially in the capital city, it's so busy that if you're there at 5 p.m., 5:30, if you don't, bro, I saw a video of a dude, he was climbing on like the wall and like the tubes, and he was climbing because he couldn't go past the people because it was so much, so people have to like actually like it's a battlefield.
So he became like
And
a Spider-Man.
it was like a Spider-Man, somebody's like filming and this dude is like clacked into like the wall and just like moving to the sides, and I'm like, oh my
The
god.
things
And
people will do, eh?
and it
What?
triggered me
That
because
situation.
that's exactly how I experienced the rush hour when I was living in the capital city in Colombia.
Wait, how do you experience?
Bro, it's so
What?
many in rush hour is so many people that you can. People is literally outside of
People are
the
crawling over
of
each
the
other.
bridge,
Yeah,
outside of
climbing
the
on the
bridge, and
bridge.
it's still like there's a line of people like trying to get their tickets.
Whoa.
So yeah, overpopulation is
It's
a
a
situation
thing.
that you
It's a
don't
thing.
want in the public transportation space. But if you do, enjoy the ride. What else can you do?
But we don't want overpopulation.
No. Do you think
For
it's an
real,
issue?
for real. Sorry?
Do you think it's an issue? Overpopulation?
Oh yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
For sure.
Overall in the world, or do you think just in certain countries?
Just in certain areas, I think. Yeah.
Do you think there's a fear or a worry that the world could become overpopulated?
Not really, but it's just the way we live, our current lifestyle. I think we're led by like the worst, not the ideal values.
So we're kind of
Like for example, if we have like a huge population just based on the idea of consumerism and buying is
overuse
happiness.
of the resources to get happiness. Yeah.
Yeah, man.
Yeah. Then you could run out of resources. Actually, that's
Yeah.
what happened on Easter Island. Right? People went there a long time ago, and they were cut off because it was an island, and they kind of used up all the resources, and they're gone because of that. They weren't able to live in harmony,
In harmony.
with the environment. In fact, humans are the only
Species
only
that-
species that doesn't live with the environment. You know, in balance. You know, we kind of
Yeah.
take more than we give.
Yeah.
You know, we might plant a tree here and there, but I think we're cutting down 100 for every tree we plant, if not more. That's a sad case, and it's all driven by
Yeah.
what? Consumerism. And what is consumerism? It's people's needs to want to have happiness
And more.
in some way, and more and more, and
And
it's never
more.
enough.
Just because, and it's never enough. Not because they're just getting a little bit of it. It's because what they're chasing is what they think is gonna make them happy. And every time they get to that place, they realize I want more. I
Yes,
still
that was
don't
not-
feel that
Yeah,
what I expected it to be, and that's kind of like the cycle of you're in the rat race, you know.
But I think it's also a path. Like I think that's great for somebody to experience that, because otherwise you also
Part of the
don't really know.
process.
I think it's
100%. Yeah, I think
part
that
of the process.
it's part of the process. You will always experience that, and that's the only way you can be like, now I know that that's not real
Yeah.
happiness. Like you see all the actors and people who seems to have a spiritual awakening, like Jim Carrey.
Yeah.
He literally says
Bro.
in TV, and he says, "I hope everyone be famous so they can realize that that is not their happiness." So
It's
the
Yeah.
greatest
This story is amazing.
Yeah.
Actually, it's basically the story of the Buddha, right? He had it all, everything he could ever imagine or dream.
Well, but for the people that don't know so much about the story, can you just encapsulate?
Yeah,
Buddha?
basically he was a Hindu prince, lived about 2,600 years ago, and he had a life of luxury. He was born into wealth. He was going to be the next king, and he had everything he could ever want: money, women, luxury, food, everything, comfort. And he was never allowed to go outside of his palace walls because his father wanted to keep him sheltered.
His name was not Buddha, right?
No, now Buddha
Siddhartha.
actually Siddhartha, yes, and Buddha only means awakened. So Buddha is the awakened one,
Yeah, I just
Is
think
it-
that.
Well, there's
making
so
that
many
distinction,
Buddhas.
Yeah.
and there's a lot of Buddhas, but
So
the
many
original
Buddhas.
Buddha was Siddhartha, and this young guy, this young prince, he finally, when he was I think a teenager or something, went outside of his palace compound, and he saw three things that really shook him and shook his belief system, and that was sickness, old age, and death. He'd never seen a sick person before. He'd never seen an old person, and he never saw a dead person. He saw all three of these when he stepped outside of his palace walls. And he said, "What is that?" And his, I think he was his assistant or someone who was with him. I think his name is Govinda. He told him,
Yeah.
"Well, death is going to happen to everyone. Old age is going to happen to everyone, and sickness. These are natural things. These happen to everyone." And Buddha was like, "I've been living this life of blissful ignorance, and I didn't know that these three things are coming for me. How can I live that way when I know that these three things exist in the world?" And he went on a journey of self-discovery to find out, because he realized that the things that he had, all the wealth, comfort, everything, didn't make him satisfied or happy.
You know what I think he went through? He went from blissful ignorance to blissful happiness. Blissful awareness.
Yes, absolutely.
Blissful
Yeah, yeah.
awareness.
That's true. But
Yeah.
to get there, that journey was difficult because he had to test and try different things. That's why I kind of admire that he actually did the journey, and there is so much information about that journey that we don't have to go through that journey to realize or learn the
I
wisdom.
think you're always on that journey.
You are, yeah.
That's
To a degree. Maybe not to the degree he went to, because
Yeah.
there were times when he thought maybe since desire is the cause of all suffering, maybe I should stop desiring everything, even food and water. And so he tried to starve himself, and he realized when he was close to death that this is not making me any happier or giving me any answers. Maybe this is not the right way of doing things. And so he realized that, okay, he had everything and then he had nothing, and both didn't give him the answers or the satisfaction or happiness he needed in life. And so he realized that it's the middle road that is the most, I guess, the best balance, for life. The middle road, not the extremes.
Yeah.
And that's why moderation is, I think, the key to life in a lot of ways, right?
Yeah, for sure.
The hero's journey, right?
That's what we're all on.
And that's the thing. The hero's journey is never a journey of the comfort zone.
Yeah.
You never see the
Never
hero's
a comfortable
journey
journey.
of he woke up in the morning, do this routine, drink his coffee at this time, watch his favorite video, or listen to his favorite song, and did the same every single day. The journey happened every single time that he was on an adventure.
Yeah.
He was outside of the comfort zone.
And we have new experiences. That's the key.
Yeah, it's all about putting yourself into unfamiliar and sometimes, and mostly, uncomfortable situations. Right?
Circumstances. Yeah.
And that's exactly what we were talking earlier here, right?
Mhm.
Yes.
We were saying logic will always try to predict what is going to be the future, and most of the time is going to predict it in order to keep the person safe in a way that is not going to feel excited to take that leap of faith. In fact, most people feel fear, and that's the reason why they never take the jump. But it's just their brain playing tricks on them.
How could someone take the jump, for example? Well, what do you think? I think we all have like different ingredient
Yeah.
or vision. What's your experience?
So I can only speak about my personal experience, what I experimented,
How did you take
and
the jump?
how did that work for me.
Mm.
I think that one of the key elements is that I always had a high degree of faith and trust into something greater than myself, that I believe wanted my well-being and wanted my success. So I always felt kind of like backed up by an invisible force. And I always knew that somehow, even though it sounded really scary at the beginning, it was going to work out perfectly for me. And I think that it's something that many people can have naturally, other people need to develop, but it's something that you can acquire, because most people think they're a victim of their circumstances, right? So the thing they always look for is what the universe didn't give me, or what the universe is not working out for me. So they have this awareness and they're conscious just about things that they feel unfortunate for. But every single person can look back into their lives, and I'm pretty sure they can pick 10 things that they can feel a sense of, wow, someone is actually here supporting what I want to accomplish for my life. Yeah. And I think that it's just a matter of becoming more aware of those things that had happened in your life. So I give you an example. When I was really young, I was like 9 years old. I was in middle school or elementary school, I don't know. And I had a class that the teacher had to teach 2 classes at the same time. So she come here in the class, she wrote down in the whiteboard whatever we needed to do, and then go to the other class and write the same, and then come back. So she was just like jumping back and forth. And I remember I was sitting down, and every time she goes to the other room to teach, we'll get crazy in the classroom and start all playing until she had to come back again. And I remember that she was like writing something in my class, and I had a pencil, and I was, what is the name of?
Sharpening?
Yeah, I was sharpening my pencil.
How do you say it in Spanish?
Tajar el lápiz. Tajar el lápiz. We were sharpening the pencil.
Who's got the time?
I was sharpening the pencil, and then I remember the teacher stood up and left, and in that moment it was playtime again. So I stood up and I had my pencil in my hand, and I started running, chasing one of my friends. And as I'm taking like a circle, one of my other friends, he saw me running and he wanted to put the foot so I could trip over. The problem is that he didn't realize I had a pencil in my hand. So he did that, and I literally just went fucking flying, like diving deep into the concrete. And I put first my hand to kind of like support myself in the floor, and the pencil went all the way until literally this bone right here, and I have a scar. I think you can see it. Maybe.
No.
You sure? And
Your eyebrows here, bro.
yeah, that's the one.
Whoa.
So
Imagine.
what happened,
That much difference.
bro? I'm not joking.
You would be
It's
different.
so minuscule
a
that
few
sometimes
degrees.
It's kind of like mathematically impossible to be like that lucky. And I remember I stood up and I didn't know what happened, and I was just feeling a little bit dizzy, and everybody's just looking at me like with the face of like in shock. And I start walking to look for the teacher. I'm like, I just wanted to say, I don't feel well. I feel like dizzy. And as soon as I arrived to her, she was like writing in the whiteboard. She turned around, she dropped it, and she was like, oh my God. My whole face and my whole body was just like covered in blood for the amount of, it's like a very powerful point here. It has a lot of blood. Anyway, I didn't die, and I could have easily had
Wow.
a moment where I wouldn't be sitting down with you here. And that's the story I look back and I feel such a deep sense of gratitude because I sharpened the pencil and I remember perfectly how sharp it was. And just a minuscule of difference, I could have changed my entire destiny forever.
Yeah.
And something like that, how can I not feel like a sense of something wants my well-being, something is there for me, and I feel that when you have that faith that no one needs to convince you of, it allows you to have a sense of confidence every time you take a leap of faith. So I think that it's all about developing the habit of becoming conscious of the things that you can look into your life and feel somebody he has my back. Something greater, whatever it is, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
It really is supporting my journey.
You know, I think it was Albert Einstein who said, everyone at some point in their life has to make a decision inside their mind whether they feel that the universe has their back or doesn't. And that decision makes all the difference.
But it just comes back to you, to your inner self.
It always is all about that. I
Because
really
you could say you are the universe.
Well, you're a part of it for sure.
You could say the universe is you.
How would you say you got out of your comfort zone and got to this
Breakthrough.
place? Where was your breakthrough to bring you to this point where you're here in Vietnam, you're also in a very good, happy state of being?
I think it was actually like the past couple of months, like during COVID. Like we were in quarantine, lockdown. I was doing a lot of like inner work, fighting all my demons, if you will. It was really intense because I think
Could you speak up a little bit just in case?
yeah, I think it was just synthesizing everything you've learned, and at some point in your life, it will just like make sense.
Coming together.
You know when you need like that powerful like the 4 stones to like open a door or something like this? It was like mystical as fuck. Like I was like, whoa, holy shit.
It's like the pieces of the puzzle.
Yeah, it was like I don't know. Like, have you ever seen like the movie The Treasure or something with Nicolas Cage?
National Treasure.
Yeah,
Yeah.
like how he has to do all these like
Yeah,
things.
and
It
then
was.
he
It
fucking
felt like
does
that.
it,
It was
yeah.
like holy fuck. Yeah, it was. I think my focus was on the wrong thing for me, and I think what we were talking before about having like different realities and having different, like having a vision, for example. Before you get that vision, I think you need to be aware that you can create your own reality. Like what you think is just your thoughts. If you think like, oh, I'm depressed, I'm sad, I'm like nothing's working for me, well, that's your reality. Nothing is, rather than being solution focused. I think that's a big thing for me.
And if we really think about it, we all know that thoughts are real.
Yeah.
Thoughts create our reality, right? So everything we see around us basically is a result of someone's thought.
And it comes back to being your original state of being, right? And being like inheriting all these like social patterns and behaviors from our parents, from everything.
What do you think
around
is the
us.
best way to strip those layers of programming off you and get
I-
back to that?
I wouldn't say this is the best way because
What is the way that worked for you?
I think meditation is like it sounds cliche, but it is. I think meditation helps you to look within yourself and just be alone with your own thoughts.
Then you become more aware of them,
Then you become aware
of your own programming.
of how your brain is wired
Yeah.
and how you can rewire your brain to make it work for you.
I mean, we never really, unless we meditate, we never really stop to think about how our brain is thinking or what it's thinking. We just go on with life and do this, do that, and we listen to it, but we never stop to think, I'm thinking this, why am I thinking this, and why am I thinking this way?
Why
know?
why do I want things? Like what's the purpose? And when you start really looking for your purpose of the purpose of things, you eventually come down to find a purpose of life that you really like. You start like drawing like a web of purposes and choices. And like why am I doing this? No, I don't really like. So that's why new experiences is like amazing because you get to
Yes.
experience and say, it's not what I'm
This-
aligned with.
Yeah,
or
this
something.
works for me. This doesn't. And
Yeah.
You make your choices and kind of correct your course as you go along,
Yeah.
right?
And meditation, by the way, is because a lot of friends that I have that are not into meditation, they think, oh, I cannot meditate because I cannot just sit down and think about anything, think about nothing. I cannot do that. I don't like it. But it's not about not thinking anything. It's just being, like, being aware of your passing thoughts. I think that's
It's also
what it is.
a way to tame your mind.
Yeah. And that's the surface. That's the surface. Because if you go deep into meditation, it can be a way to transcend where you are right now and really get to know yourself. I mean, I'm sure you experience this in meditation where you can connect your mind and your being, like your heart and your mind. And when you connect that, it's like, wow, it's powerful.
You do a lot of meditation.
Yeah.
Yeah, I had a lot of resistance at the beginning because the way I got introduced about meditation was my dad. When I was growing up, I remember, since I have memory, seeing my dad meditating for like 2 hours in the living room at 6, 7 p.m. every day. And he invited me so many times, and I just thought it was weird, first. And second, I used to not enjoy it. So very often he used to tell me, do you want to sit down with me and share a meditation session? I'm like, no, I'm sorry, I'm busy. I was making my excuses.
Little kid who's busy, huh?
Yeah,
Bro,
I'm
did you
just like,
hate-
dude, I'm busy. I'm in my room right now, and I got a lot of things to worry about right now. But I believe that planted the seed for when I was really young, and I had a lot of resistance. Got into it before I left Australia about 3.5 years ago. And I remember the first time I was just like sitting down, I'm like, now I'm gonna meditate like properly for the first time ever. And I had a guided meditation, and I closed my eyes, put my headphones. 15 minutes was the meditation. And then when I opened my eyes, I felt I discovered fire. Because one thing is what you hear about meditation, and another thing is what you experience in meditation. What I realized is the key component for me is meditation has many stages, and the harder it is really comes down to the person, to the subject, because so many people have never ever stopped like that inner voice in their head, that the momentum is like trying to stop a train, with your fucking arms. It's not gonna happen like this. Meanwhile, other people have developed patterns of like being more relaxed throughout the day,
Yeah.
and they have it easier to like
Yeah.
relax into it and to get to that place. So what I realize is that the experience is gonna be so different, but they all have this common place of nothingness, what they call the void. When you're able to reach the place where you shut down your logical thinking mind, the inner voice, when you shut down your ego, when you don't identify yourself anymore as a body, because you don't even feel your body anymore. You just feel that you are everything, and everything is you.
Yeah.
You don't have a name, you don't have a color of your skin, you don't have a job, you don't have anything to worry about looking forward for the future or complaining about the past. It's just this moment of presence. Even if you stay there for 5 minutes, what I feel in that moment was just a relief into understanding how little I really know about myself and about what I can accomplish
Yes.
just with my focus. Because meditation really is about understanding that you can change your state of being. People is all day reacting to what their circumstances is throwing at them, and they're fucking angry because this person is this way, they're angry because their wife is that way, they're angry because this driver did this. So they accustomed to just be reactive to everything that is happening around us.
So they're reacting instead
Instead
of
of
acting.
or responding.
And their
Yeah, responding, yeah.
exactly, and their state of being is being controlled by
Yeah.
external forces. But very, very few people take the time to actually create the habit of creating their own state of being before anything outside of themselves happen first.
Yeah.
And that's actually the concept that Joe Dispenza speaks about a lot. It's about, do you remember Tony Robbins, what he says about change? It can come from two ways.
Inspiration or desperation.
So can you elaborate on that?
Well, I mean, we don't have much time left. We've got 4 minutes. So I'll
I
make
think
it
this
very...
is a great finish line to like wrap out everything we spoke about.
Yeah, I mean, people are driven by fear and pleasure, right? So they're going to try to do as much as they possible to avoid pain or fear and go towards pleasure. And that's what leads change. It's only when we're really desperate and we have no choice and we have to make a change because it's too painful to stay where we are. That's when we make change. Or if we're really inspired by some new idea or thought or, just some new energy comes into us, then we change. But it really takes an extreme of one or the other.
Yes.
We're not really changing because we want to. We're kind of being led by our environment, and we need to take control. And I think meditation is the way to start to take control of this vehicle.
Yeah.
Once you can manage your emotions or be aware of them, bro.
Sky's
First
the limit.
step is
Yep.
always become aware of them. That's the
Yeah.
element. First step is always just become aware of what is your habitual pattern of emotions and thoughts. Just know them at least. Because
Yeah.
if you don't know what you have, you don't know what you need to change. And exactly what you were mentioning. People are gonna change either from a state of fear because something external happened to them that forced that change to happen, and it's like changing through pain. And you don't have to. And other people, that is very few people, and I believe that that's kind of like the journey of mastering the emotions, is you need to understand you can change as well from inspiration, a place coming from within of wanting more well-being for you and for those around you. And we all know that the change always starts within you. That's really the key.
So in the last couple of minutes, Mr. Danny, do you want to, like we've talked about a lot of interesting things. We could talk for hours. You're an interesting guy, and I mean, this is a subject we all really enjoy discussing. But is there something that you feel you could leave us and, perhaps people who are listening, maybe a bit of advice or something that helped you to make a profound change or inspired you to make a profound change in your life, that you could say that if I could let people know of one thing that made a big effect on me, it was this?
I would say meditation.
Okay.
100%. I think meditation is the gateway to the inner self, to your inner self.
And I think that leads to your outer self.
Yeah,
changing
for
too.
me, it felt like you go in, and then inside it's like, and I could keep going in. You can keep going inside all you want, and then, but it felt like going in and then having like the bouncy thing. How do you call this? Like an elastic inside of me, and you just like bounced off to the outer world. Does it make
So it
does it
starts
make
with the
sense?
inside and then it comes out.
Yeah.
You can affect your outer world by starting with your inner
Yes,
world,
100%.
right? Yeah, it makes sense. Absolutely.
So thank you for everything. Meditate.
Meditate.
And don't try to become good at meditation because
Don't
you cannot
judge.
quantify it. Just do it because you're feeling like it's the gym for the.
It's the gym for the mind.
It's just the gym for the
It's
mind.
like mental
See it like
push-ups.
that. You are
Yeah.
going to the training place,
Yeah.
and the more you do it, the better you get at it. So,
And like anything, you start off at one place and you keep going, and you will get better as you do it. So check it out. We'll have more discussions about meditation and how powerful it
Absolutely,
is. But for now, check it out on your own, because I'm telling you, it's life changing. And this is the way to control your mind.
absolutely.
Yeah. No one gives you a manual, but this is the manual that we never got.
And that's
So-
not even the hard work. The hard work is integrating that in your life. That's
true.
like the hardest struggle, because you can have all these visions
don't
and
scare
everything.
people off, man.
But okay, yeah, no, it's easy.
It's hard, but it's also enjoyable, right?
Yeah, it's worth it, 100%.
So thanks for being on with us, Danny. We
Yeah.
really appreciate it. And namaste to you.
Thank
and
you, guys.
Namaste Saigon. We'll see you guys next time. You never said namaste, man. What's going on here?
Namaste, guys.